why doesn't Yu Yu Hakusho get more credit? When you think of everything it accomplished, naturally you'd expect it to be talked about more than it is, despite its age. Instead, it's not even the most talked about work Togashi has. Today, I'm going to talk about 3 reasons why Yu Yu Hakusho deserves to be talked about more amongst the legends of anime. The first is obvious. To this day, the Dark Tournament is still the greatest tournament arc ever. It's insane that decades have passed and nothing has been able to top it. What makes it so interesting is that it's a total deconstruction of most tournament arcs, and yet it's still the best one. Think about it. Most tourney arcs are one-on-one fights where characters enter it willingly for a chance at glory. The Dark Tournament is team-based, and Yusuke's team isn't some close group of friends. In fact, they've all fought Yusuke recently, but they have to be united to succeed. Why? Because they were blackmailed into entering in the first place, with the consequence of defiance being death. That adds a whole other dimension to the arc where there is always tension present. It's one of those things where every time you watch it, you pick up on something new and makes you enjoy it even more. It has an all-time great villain in Toguro, and the rest of his team was interesting too. In fact, every team we spent time with was. None of them felt similar or redundant, and it's remarkable how creative each group feels, even on a rewatch decades later. Jin and Chu particularly stand out. The other thing I enjoyed about the team element of the tournament is it allowed every member of Team Urameshi to shine. Hiei, Kurama, Genkai, and Kuwabara all have amazing moments in this arc. It's not all about Yusuke. There's so much more that goes into it too. The entire underlying story between Genkai and Toguro, and how that influences the Yusuke-Toguro dynamic. Everything going on behind the scenes with Sakio and his goals. The refs get swapped out and have their own little moments. People in the crowd die, and that's before we touch on any of the incredible singular moments. Dragon of the Darkness Flame, Yoko Kurama, Yusuke in the Spirit Orb, Kuwabara against Toguro, Yusuke versus Toguro, and plenty more. The next reason Yu Yu Hakusho deserves more recognition is how ambitious the show was. The show literally begins by killing the main character in the first episode, and then the first arc is all about him trying to find his way back to the land of the living. Even now, that sounds fun, but this came out 30 years ago. When you couple that with how well that was handled, the misguided delinquent dying while saving a child, you realize this was something special. And that's only how it started. I already talked about it, but then by deconstructing everything that made tournament arcs, it made the greatest one. Then it kept going. Think about Chapter Black, a concept that feels so far ahead of its time, a tape that shows all the horrific things humanity has done and how that can corrupt even those designated to protect Earth. A concept like that feels modern, and again, it came out 30 years ago. My only guess for why it isn't talked about as much as it should be is the animation isn't great. It's certainly watchable, but when you consider it aired at the same time as Dragon Ball Z, you realize how wide the gap in visuals was, even for its time. I can't wait to eventually see it all reanimated, but I do hope it keeps the gritty aesthetic. But we've got one more thing to talk about. The last one is particularly special. Yu Yu Hakusho has arguably the best villains of its era, and when it comes to complexity, I don't think it's even close. I'm not aware of any anime from that era that challenged their protagonist in the way Yusuke is challenged on all fronts by his collective rogues gallery. Hiei and Kurama are introduced only a few episodes in, and while they eventually become heroes or anti-heroes, they're complex from the beginning. Younger Toguro is the pinnacle of complex villains, and while I'll touch on him more in my next video, his legacy has been cemented as an all-time great. It's fascinating because he is one type of reflection of Yusuke, only for the next arc to feature an entirely different villain, Sensui, who is also a reflection of Yusuke, but in a completely different way. Toguro is kind of a glimpse at what Yusuke would be if he abandoned everything to achieve strength. Sensui is literally Yusuke's predecessor, and he's what could happen if Yusuke loses faith in the people he's sworn to protect. The Dark Tournament, while amazing, is easier on his conscience because basically that entire arc is facing demons. Sensui is a human, his minions are human. To kill a human is a much more difficult burden for him to bear, and that's the point. Sensui wants to prove the hypocrisy of such action, and by the time his arc has ended, he's one of the first villains I can remember where you criticize his actions, but understand why he does what he does. Like the tournament and with Toguro, Sensui is another part of the show that only improves when you rewatch it, and I think that needs more recognition. With that, I'm out.